Let's do this. Design. What is design? Design is a superpower. It's a power. And as we progress through these different videos on design, I'm going to prove it to you. You're going to see the power of design. And I'm not talking about just your like everyday like graphic design. I'm talking about high level, timeless design, high end design. That's the design that is a superpower. And that design is hard to teach, it's hard to explain. It's one of the hardest things in art to comprehend. And you're not going to just get this superpower bestowed on you unless you go through some like many years of training and trying to obtain this power. And it is a power. That's what design, one of the things design is a power. And design has elements and it has principles. Because of that, it's easy to hear, or when someone mentions design and you hear them, you often know they're just kind of blowing smoke. They don't know what they're actually talking about because they don't know what the principles of design are and they don't know what the elements of design are. And therefore, how can they have an opinion on what good or bad design is? You know, that's like trying to ask, that's like going to someone that makes airplane engines and you're like, oh yeah, that's a really good engine, you know, that's really well how that's put together and built. And you have no idea on like what airplane parts are, how they fit together, or what makes a good engine. But you're like telling them like that's a better engine and this is a like it's nonsense. You're just blowing smoke. That's kind of like how like you can have your opinion on what you think looks good to you, but that's just like a very low level like opinion like what you think looks good to you versus that being actually a great design. And great design is not subjective. It's very objective. It's very objective. It just takes a while to really understand good design. Some people have a good eye and they kind of see it, kind of understand it, but it's also highly limited if they don't have real application and real training on what great design is. And I'm talking about even people that study design in the graphic field. People that study design in the graphic field have a leg up on other people, don't get me wrong. But if that's all they have, they're also quite limited. And I'm going to prove that to you. As we're figuring out what design is, we got to appeal to some authority, right? To gain like a good start. Like if you want to find out about a particular subject, look into the authorities of that subject. Like for example, if I'm going to want to be a basketball coach, let's just say hypothetically, that I might be like, it might be a really good idea to look at Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich is the coach for the San Antonio Spurs. The San Antonio Spurs won championships and they didn't always have like the greatest players in the league. But with what they did have, they made the best of it because they were phenomenally coached. And as a coach, he not only did he know how to manage personalities and egos, but he was fantastic at getting them to play as a team. And he was a wizard at coming up with plays and also bringing about the best qualities of each player and molding them together into one single cohesive engine that just knew how to drive that ball into the basket. And it could have been done, you know, during different eras. It was the offense ran through different players. That is brilliance. And if you wanted to get into coaching, of course you're going to look into Greg Popovich because that's a phenomenal coach. That's an appeal to authority. And if you're a good student, that'd be a smart place to start. I'm not saying like, oh, you find an authority and you just obey and hear everything they say and take it into your consciousness like a law and don't question it. No. I'm saying that's a good place to start. That's where you start. So what's in an authority in art that we can appeal to so that we might understand more about what design is? And that is Michelangelo. Michelangelo, baby. Michelangelo. That's not to be taken lightly. People underestimate now how phenomenal the talent of Michelangelo had to be, so that today, in 2023, we're still talking about Michelangelo. That's crazy. In 2023, we're still talking. Over 500 years later, we're aware of who Michelangelo is, and we're still talking about him. People that don't give a shit about art know who Michelangelo is. That's how insane that is. Why? Because as an artist, even in his lifetime, he was unanimously known as the best of the best. He's the best of all time. The GOAT, right? I'm tired of people saying GOAT. So now it's the best of all time. The GOAT. The GOAT of artists is Michelangelo. And still to this day, if indeed he did make those works, he is the best of all time. And we're talking about the statue of Moses. It's like 14, 15 feet tall. We're talking about sculpting that out of marble. I spend so many years training myself to be able to learn how to draw the human figure, which is the academic standard of an artist. It reflects an artist's ability. How good they draw the human figure reflects an artist's ability. How fluid they are at doing it. How well they understand it, right? Like anybody can just copy a photograph and spend hours and hours and hours just copying a photograph. But can you draw it fluidly? Can you just effortlessly put a figure down? Can you do it with many poses? You know, can you do it in dynamic action? Can you draw that from your mind? Can you take a reference and enhance that and make it something even more special or more unique, right? Can you look at a life drawing model and draw that figure and not only draw it, but draw it in a way where it's even more extreme and it has more force and more energy? That took years to learn. Years to like learn anatomy, learn gesture, and put all that into practice. Let alone sculpting that. Sculpting that is a whole nother like league. And that you can sculpt in wood. This dude was doing it in freaking marble. There's no going back. If you chop the shoulder, or if you like made the torso too small, there's no going back from that. And you have to start all over with another marble piece? That's insanity. And the scale that he worked in and how academically accurate he got. But he went beyond that because he put soul and spirit into his works. You're just like, whoa. And that's just his sculpture. Then he goes and he's like, I'm not a painter. But he makes what arguably are the two greatest paintings ever made. The Last Judgment and the Sistine Chapel. Look, I don't know if those are the greatest paintings ever made. There's some phenomenal paintings out there. But almost by and large, unanimously, the art community, the professionals, the highest of highest, no matter if you're in Asia and you speak to like high-level Asian artists, if you're in Singapore and you're in Vietnam and you're in China, like no matter where you're at in Asia, if you speak to some high-level artists, eventually they'll be like, oh yeah, Michelangelo was the best ever. He was the best of all time. If you go to Latin America, they'll tell you that too. If you go to America, they'll tell you that too. If you go to Europe, obviously, they'll tell you there. Michelangelo was the best of the best. He did the Sistine Chapel. I actually do think the Sistine Chapel is the greatest painting ever made. And the Renaissance had an insane artist, like an insane lineup. And they made timeless art. Timeless art is different. Timeless art is built different. Because it's so epic, it's so well done, it's so magnificent, it's so marvelous that centuries and centuries and centuries later, we're still going like, holy shit, how did they make that? That was whoa, that was a work of art that is still like staggering and mind-boggling. That's timeless art. I mean, compare it to like, for example, songs from the 40s. You can name me a band from the 40s that you still listen to today, like actively talk about. Yep, none. Most people can't name one unless they're like 70, right? Unless they're 60, then they can tell you some. But how many people do you know right now are in Gen Z, millennials, or even some Gen X who like can tell you like some bands from the 40s that they listen to still. Like artists still train and study Michelangelo artworks. And they still talk about Michelangelo with love because the standard he set still to this day is unrivaled, it's unparalleled, it's incredible. That is a monster artist, and it gets tiresome to some people to hear it that are within the art community, but that's because it's facts. It's just like it's the truth. It's what it is, and it's timeless. I went to Italy and I saw some of his art. Everyone was there. Everyone. A timeless work of art crosses cultural barriers, crosses traditional barriers, crosses race barriers, crosses age barriers, and everybody gathers and marvels at it. And when I was there looking at the Sistine Chapel, I mean, that room was filled with so many people from so many different countries, all ages, all marveling at the Sistine Chapel. Didn't even matter if they weren't religious. They were just like, damn, this is incredible. Can't believe that someone painted that. Yeah, that was Michelangelo. Freaking phenomenal. So what did Michelangelo say about design? Right? What did the boat say about design? Best quote. Never found a best quote. That's why we're starting this design series, because it's going to take several parts to truly explain what design is. And we're going to build a case, and I'm going to show you how it's a massive superpower if you obtain this timeless design skill, which I'm after. Like, I'm doing my best trying to gain that. But here's what Michelangelo said. Design, which by another name is called drawing, and consists of it, is the fountain body of painting, sculpture, architecture, and every other kind of painting, and the root of all sciences. Let whoever may have attained to so much as to have the power of drawing know that he holds a great treasure. There it is. Michelangelo telling you drawing is a great power. Again, in part 2, I will show you, I will make my case on how it's a great power. But right now, we're going to look at the first line. Design, which by another name is called drawing. Those two are married. Those two are one. Those two are interlinked. Design and drawing. And this is why I say, if all you do is study design, but you never truly develop your drawing skills, which is another lifelong endeavor, you got to develop drawing skills. Like, you got to see it like a seed. If you had the talent to draw, then it's a seed. How far did you take that seed? Did you water it until it budded? Did you water it until that bud became more of a branch, right? And it started coming up as a seedling and little leaves sprouted, right? And then it started turning more into a trunk, right? How far did you take drawing? Because that process is like, it takes years of your devotion of drawing. There's so many aspects to it. There's your dexterity side that has to do with your calligraphy skills, which has to do with your hand control and penmanship. Then there's the life drawing side that has to do with anatomy and gesture. So you have to study anatomy. You have to study gesture. Gesture drawing is harder than anatomy. Gesture drawing challenged me way more than anatomy ever did. Anatomy is what some people think I'm best at. I'm better at gesture drawing than I am at anatomy, because it was an obsession, because it was so hard, and it took like 4 years to get good at gesture drawing, and doing that weekly, almost daily, but never miss my weekly sessions. And I had multiple sessions per week on gesture drawing, and that took a while to develop because it's hard, and that's yet another pillar of drawing. What's another pillar of drawing? Rendering and lighting. Easiest part. High school students can do rendering and lighting. It's the easiest thing. If you can shade really good, if you can light really good, if you can render really good, if you can mix colors and blend colors really good, like airbrush and shit like that, that's the easiest part. I used to think that was like a bigger deal. No, that's the easiest part to learn. Gesture drawing, anatomy, and perspective and calligraphy. Those aspects of drawing as well as observation, huge part of drawing. Those 5 aspects of drawing are so hard to learn. Each one takes hard drills and drills that take several weeks, months, and some years to really like attain like what you're trying to get out of that drill. And that's drawing, and that endeavor is going to take many, many, many years to really sharpen and get good at. And when I say get good at, I mean at the level of a timeless or a golden age artist. You know, we're talking about here like Frazetta's, Norman Rockwell's, John Singer Sargent's, J.C. Leyendeckers. We're talking about those kinds of caliber of artists. You know, because there's always a range, you know. There's always a range that you can fall on. And you can say, oh, I can draw good. Yeah, but you fall like on the lower tier of that range. Maybe compared to the average person that hardly ever picks up a pencil to doodle, compared to that person, you can draw well. But compared to like an entry-level artist and on animation, that dude will run circles around you. You know what I mean? But that guy, compared to like a junior level artist, that artist will run circles around them. And that dude, compared to like a senior, like director level artist, that will, you know, so there's levels. And then that guy, compared to like a really, really good seasoned, like modern day kind of like master professor, that guy will run circles around that dude. And then that dude, compared to like a silver age artist or a golden age artist, so that's what I'm trying to say. There's ranges. Michelangelo is trying to tell you that design is linked with drawing, and that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense because as I've learned more to draw and as I develop my design skills by doing logos and posters and by designing in Photoshop and designing later on motion graphics, which is design in motion, which is like now taking into account even more design principles. As I've developed my design along with my drawing skills, my hand drawing skills, I've seen like how these are basically reflections of each other. Like if you think about it, it's one coin, it's one golden big ass coin, and one side is drawing and the other side is design. What some people make a mistake is they study drawing without looking at the design principles and elements and working out their design skills. And I've seen people that work your design skills, but then they don't work on their drawing skills. The power that Michelangelo is talking about is when you work both aspects of that at a high level, which takes a long time. And there's no shortcut. It takes a long time. This is the truth. It's like a phenomenal, simple quote explaining to you what literally design is, and it is drawing. And then it's also the fount and body of painting. So if you want to become a badass painter, learn to draw. And you're going to be able to paint. Because if you spend the time to do all the things I just mentioned, perspective, anatomy, gesture, calligraphy, design, right? Observation. All of that's going to develop your sense of how to use a brush and how to properly like lay in form and see form and light form. And that's going to turn you into a painter. And then you're not going to have limits also on what you can paint. It's also the foundation of sculpture. You know, all the sculptors that I know from my lifetime, before they sculpt, they draw out what they're going to sculpt. And as they're drawing, they're designing the angles, they're designing the shapes, they're designing the forms. And through that, they're like, oh, okay, this is what it's going to look like from the front view. This is going to look from the back. This is what it's going to look like from the 3/4. This is the profile. This is the top. This is the bottom. That you're designing something from the ground up. In architecture, my God, you have to learn perspective. That means you have to learn to draw. And learning to draw means you have to learn 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, warp perspective, 5-point perspective, and actually how to conceptualize with them and make some serious concepts and be able to do archways and all the different scale and all the different interiors and exteriors. That perspective alone as a pillar of drawing, that one also takes a while to truly learn. You know, and that gives you the ability to do vehicle design. That gives you the ability to do cars, airplanes, trains, planes, automobiles. Like That gives you the ability to design mechanical things. And guess what is behind architecture? It's drawing. And as you learn to draw and you have the skills to actually do that properly, now you can apply design to that and you can design it the way you want. If you suck at drawing, it doesn't matter how well you know some of these design principles, because your drawing will look like crap. So how are you going to design a cool looking car? How are you going to design a brand new ship or airship or spaceship or airplane, right? How are you going to design a convincing environment, a convincing exterior, interior building, if you don't quite understand how to draw it, that it looks sloppy and sketchy and things are off scale and out of proportion, right? You can't draw things to scale or be consistent with your molds and your scaffolding. That's why, like, you have to have drawing. And if you have drawing, you can do all these things. You can sculpt, you can do architecture, you can paint, right? And in the modern era, oh man, in the modern era, that's where we get into what the power. I mean, if that alone isn't attractive, that alone doesn't show you the power. In the modern era, you can, and but I'm not saying they didn't do this in the past, but definitely in the modern era, you have animation, filmmaking, comic books, manga. This stuff is where you're gonna truly see the extent of what being a great designer, a timeless designer, which means you can draw awesome and design awesome. You're gonna see what you're capable of. Anyways, this has been JC Barba with part 1 on the design series. Look forward to the next part. Peace.